Eric here, and just wanted to record a quick video on how to maximize webinar show-up rates. I've noticed a trend lately of webinar show-up rates actually going down in a lot of niches and a lot of markets, especially markets that have a lot of webinars going on, so there's a lot of webinar saturation. And the first tip I have on improving webinar show-up rates is don't promote the webinar too far in advance. Mistake I'll see a lot of people make is they start promoting 10, 15 days out, and people are going to forget about it, they're not going to show up. What I've found is the sweet spot is at about 3 to 4 days out, and the absolute maximum, especially if you're using paid ads, is 7 days out. So try to run your ads starting about 4 days out from the live webinar. Now, sometimes that means you're going to have to spend a little bit more on your daily budget to fill the webinar. And when you do that, sometimes your cost per registrant can go up. But the key we're looking for is the cost per attendee. And when you promote within that 4-day window, usually your cost per attendee, because your show-up rate goes up, is going to be lower than it would have if you started promoting too far out. Now, the next one is SMS reminders, text reminders. Whenever possible, try to either make it optional, or I've even tested having mandatory SMS reminders, and usually it doesn't lower registration rates that much even when you make it mandatory. You want to test it for your individual market. Some markets are more sensitive to giving out their phone numbers than others. And the other thing about sending out SMS reminders is not only does it improve show-up rate, but it gives you then their phone number that you can follow up after the webinar and call anybody who attended the webinar and didn't buy. Got a specific script and strategy around that. If you're interested, send me a message. I can give you some details on that. But it also allows you then to call them, interview them, get some information from them about why they didn't buy. And a lot of times you can overcome their objection and actually make the sale, either you or one of your team members. The other one is having a downloadable PDF worksheet. So when they sign up, they get a downloadable PDF worksheet that has some fill-in-the-blank stuff that kind of teases them about some of the content that's going to be coming on the webinar. I found that's a good way to increase registration rate and increase participation rate during the webinar. If they're following along in the PDF, they print it out, they're filling out some of the fill-in-the-blank answers to different parts of the content and what you're teaching. That can help show up rate as well. The other one is sending out at least 2 good content videos between the time they register and the time the webinar happens. I usually like to send the first one out the day after they register and send another one the day before the webinar, so that fits well within a 4-day sequence there. And in these videos, they don't have to be long, 3 to 5 minutes max. You want to, number one, teach them some good quality content. These kind of pre-indoctrinate your people to know you, like you, and trust you, especially if they're coming from cold traffic. So that is going to contribute to higher conversion rates on the webinar because you've delivered some good value. But also a critical part of these videos is then to tease them about what's coming up on the webinar, to open up some mental loops, really hook them and resell them on why they signed up for the webinar in the first place. So those videos can play a very good role in, of course, send those out in your email sequence. And you can also use those same videos in retargeting ads. One of the best ways to increase webinar show-up rate is to do some retargeting within Facebook particularly. They get that retargeting pixel on the thank you page after they register, create a custom audience within Facebook on that, and send them ads for the days leading up to the webinar. They can be short video ads, they can be these content videos, but again, just reminding them that, hey, you signed up for our webinar, remember that's coming up on Thursday night at 7 or whenever the webinar is, and here's some good quality information that I wanted to give you as a thank you for signing up before you show up. So retargeting can be a very, very good way to increase your show up rate. The next one is, and this is kind of the core of any show up strategy, is a very, very aggressive show up email sequence, particularly on the day of the webinar. A lot of people are afraid to hit people too hard. They're afraid they're going to get unsubscribes, and you will get some if you're being aggressive enough. But if you're paying for traffic, and this is cold traffic that doesn't already know you, like you, and trust you and have a relationship, sometimes this is your only shot to get them to actually show up on the webinar. So day of the webinar, you got to be as aggressive as possible. I typically like a 5 email sequence, so we'll send an email kind of the morning of, letting them know what's happening today. Another email number 2 about 4 hours out. Email number 3 about 1 hour out from the webinar. Another email 15 minutes out, and then another email right when the webinar is starting. It's a aggressive sequence. You're really pounding them, but if you're seeing super low, below 10 to 15% show up rates, you absolutely have to get aggressive. You know, I've got a saying that I've said for years that timid marketers have skinny kids, so you gotta really pound them a day of webinar. All right, and another tip for increasing show up rate is on the thank you page after they register, really make sure that you've got calendar links that they can click on to add it to their Google Calendar, their iCal, all the different calendar applications. This is really important that you not only have those links on there, but draw attention to them, either in the copy on that page, or even better yet, if on the thank you page you have a video congratulating them for signing up, teasing them again about what they're going to learn on the webinar, and then pointing out, hey, add this to your calendar. Click on the links, over on the left or over on the right, however they're positioned on your page, and actually point at them as you're saying this in the video if you're doing a headshot video. But do everything you can to get them to actually add it to their calendar. Even in some of your email reminders, after they've registered, drop those calendar links where they can add it to their calendar as well. It's absolutely critical. Now, the next one is to give them some freebies on the webinar for showing up, but make sure you tease them about these freebies that they're going to be getting. Talk about, hey, we're going to be doing a Q&A at the end. I normally charge $2,500 an hour for my consulting time, or whatever your rate is. Add some value to this, but let them know you're going to be doing Q&A at the end, so they can get access to asking you questions on this live webinar. But also, if you have any free PDFs or videos or any extra bonuses that they get as a gift for showing up. Sometimes, if you're doing a really big webinar as part of a launch, I've done things in the past like giving away an iPad on the webinar to somebody who shows up. So contests, anything you can do to bribe them basically to show up on the webinar, that's going to help as well. Obviously, you got to know your numbers if you're giving away expensive stuff, but PDFs or anything that is complementary but non-competitive to the core offer you're making at the webinar can be a great thing to give them as a show-up bribe. But make sure you let them know about that, not just when the webinar starts to get them to stick around till the end, but before they show up on the webinar. Really tease them about these free bonuses that they're going to be getting. And another one, which I kind of touched on, but I want to expand on, is opening up mental loops. Okay, so on both the registration page, so when they click on your ad and they go to the page to register, in the bullet points where you're telling them about what they're going to get, or what the big value, what the big benefit to them of showing up on the webinar will be, we want to open up some loops in their mind. So you can start a story or really tease them really, really strong about something that they're going to be learning. Say, you're going to learn the 3 biggest mistakes that are absolutely killing your fitness, and they're common mistakes that almost everybody's making, and you just really tease them, scare them if you can, whatever you have to do to open up these loops in their mind that makes them think to themselves, wow, I have to show up on this webinar to just find out the answer to this one bullet point. Another thing, if you're seeing chronically low show up rate on your webinar, is your big promise. The promise you're making, the big hook itself of the webinar just might not be strong enough. You might not be appealing strong enough to people's self-interest. You might not be appealing to something that invokes enough curiosity, enough what's in it for me, for them to actually show up on the webinar. You might have intrigued them enough to give you the name and email address, but when it comes time to the webinar, number one, they forgot why they signed up. and the big promise you're making just isn't better than watching a rerun of Friends or whatever else they're doing during that time slot. So you want to, if you're seeing chronically low show up rates, really revisit what that big promise, that big hook for your webinar is, and make sure you're opening up enough mental loops about that. Another new one that's working, I'm experimenting a little bit with right now and seeing really good results, is messenger bots within Facebook. Used the right way. Now there's some very spammy ways to use messenger bots that can get your ad account shut down. I'm not recommending that kind of stuff on more aggressive front end kind of marketing. I know some people are doing real well with it. I'm not sure it's going to be a long-term tactic. I think eventually Facebook's going to crack down on that side of it. But just like you would use a text message sequence or an email sequence, using messenger bots within Facebook to send them reminders. Number one, a thank you reminder when they show up, saying thank you, congratulations, here's your link to add it to your calendar. Some of the same stuff you'd have in that first email, but then day of, hitting them a few times with some messenger bot messages can increase show up rate quite dramatically in some cases, as we're seeing in some of the new testing. And if all else fails, if you've tried everything you can and for whatever reason you're still not getting at least a 20 to 30% show up rate on your live webinars, it might be time to pivot to Evergreen. Okay, switching to an Evergreen model, especially a just-in-time model, where they sign up and they've got a webinar starting sometime in the next 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. The show-up rate can be dramatically higher. Now, because it's Evergreen and it's not live, conversion rate on the webinar can drop a little bit, but we've seen show-up rates on 15-minute just-in-times where they land on the landing page and, hey, this webinar is starting in 6 minutes and 15 seconds. We've seen 85 to 95% show-up rates for the people who sign up for those webinars. Now, I'd also give them an option if they're not available right now to sign up for a webinar a couple days out. So they've got an option, either they can sign up for the one that's happening right now, or they can sign up for one, let's say 2 days later at 7 p.m. or whatever works best for your market. Which time of day, by the way, is just a kind of a final one, is test different times of day. For B2B markets versus B2C markets, sometimes, doing a webinar in the middle of the day for a business to consumer market might not be the sweet spot. Sometimes 7 p.m. in their time zone could be better for them. Some markets respond better on weekends, and some markets are terrible on weekends. So it's going to take some testing and experimentation to find what the sweet spot time frame and time of day of week is for your particular market and your particular webinars. But if you're seeing really, really low show up rates, sometimes that's an indication that you're just holding your webinar at the wrong time of day or wrong day of the week for your particular market. So hopefully these tips have helped you increase show up rates on your webinar. If you have any further questions, just go ahead and post them in the comments here, and get out there and do some more webinars. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.